And Jenny, do we all pass to the next person, or how are we doing that?
He's gonna call on each person.
Okay. All right. Cool.
And
So
your
we're-
first. I did. It might take a second. She says we should be live now.
Maybe it'll take, let me just hit times also.
Okay, so let's get started. My name is Herman Lindsey. I'm the Executive Director of Witness to Innocent. I was innocent on death row in Florida. There are 190 people in the U.S. who have been exonerated from death row. Witness to Innocence is an NGO of by and for death row exonerees. Thank you for joining us today to discuss this very important topic. A UN moratorium on the death penalty would be a great step forward for human rights. I will be calling each of our speakers up to the podium. I will ask them to introduce themselves. First, I would like to welcome a new good friend of mine, the former governor of Maryland and commissioner at the International Coalition Against the Death Penalty.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Lindsey. And Mr. Lindsey's a soft-spoken man. In case you thought he said a no good friend of mine, he said a new good friend of mine. And I consider myself to be a new good friend of Mr. Lindsey as well. And I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be here today. It's a heavy news day in the country, lots of things going on. And yet this is an issue that needs to be elevated, that we need to talk about. This begins a week of action, of calling to action from groups all across the country, and it is about this issue. Namely, every 2 years at the UN, on the international stage, the question is called, should we have a moratorium on global executions or not? And most recently, about a month ago, in the third committee vote at the UN, there were 129 nations that voted for a moratorium, not unlike the moratorium that has been federally declared here in the United States. 129 nations and only 30-some that voted against a moratorium, that said, no, we can't be for the abolition of the death penalty globally. We want to maintain the death penalty. Who are some of the countries that wish to maintain the death penalty? Besides communist China and North Korea, Saudi Arabia, Iran, which is now executing young protester college students in order to use the death penalty as a weapon of terror to keep their people down. And among those 30 nations that vote against a moratorium is also, sadly, our own nation, the United States of America, founded on fundamental principles that we are all endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This issue of the death penalty here in the United States of America has now been abandoned by 23 of the 50 states. There are another 4 states that have effective moratoria in place, including recently, I think, Alabama, because of the horrific botched executions in the state of Alabama. But that's a majority of our own United States, and we also have a president in Joe Biden, the very first person ever elected president with an abolitionist policy position. That is to say, that he is against the death penalty because he realizes it is not a deterrent, it is expensive, it does not work, it has never and can never in a human system of justice ever be flawlessly imposed. The strongest evidence of the truth that sometimes people get wrongly convicted, even of the death penalty, are some of the individuals you're going to hear from in just a moment. standing here with me. They are people who sat on death row, who for many years faced the possibility, the sentence of their own execution, only to be exonerated. Recently, Mr. Lindsey and I were in Europe with a lot of people from countries that are our traditional allies: Germany, France, Spain, Ireland, and other nations. All of the European nations, 40 out of 50 African nations whose representatives are all here and within blocks of us today. And one of the people that spoke at that conference pointed out something that I think perhaps we lose sight of when it comes to the death penalty being antithetical to democracy. In a democracy, we believe that no government, since government is the servant, should have the power to take another life. But the second thing he said was this: that democracy itself allows for mistakes to be made, allows for us to correct those mistakes. The death penalty is the only sentence that cannot be reversed once it is imposed. This issue is part and parcel of a broader movement of criminal justice reform in our country. And I have with me electronically, because I wanted to leave it open long enough for as many co-signers as possible, a letter that was circulated by the Leadership Conference for Civil and Human Rights around this very issue. And it calls for President Biden to bring into alignment the United States vote at the UN on this important issue of the death penalty. Let's stop voting with Iran. Let's stop giving cover to Saudi Arabia. Instead, let's return to our true selves as a nation. Vote with the other 129 nations that have that believe that the death penalty should be abolished. This letter from the Council on the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights has been signed by, this is a long list, but it's worth repeating. Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, co-signed by the NAACP, co-signed by the Urban League, as well as the Advancement Project, Advocates for Friends on Death Row, American Atheists, American Constitution Society, American Civil Liberties Union, American Humanists Association, American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, Americans for Democratic Action, Amnesty International, Arab American Institute, Center for Death Penalty Litigation, Center for Disability Rights, Clearinghouse on Women's Issues, Death Penalty Action, and I really want to thank Abe and all of the people at Death Penalty Action. Do not let me forget, Herman, a call to action as I wrap up my filibuster here. We're only on the D's, friends. Death Penalty Focus, Mike Farrell and his group in California, Disability Rights Education, Drop LWOP New England, Fair and Just Prosecution, Feminist Majority Foundation, Freedom from Religion Foundation, Georgians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, Hip Hop Caucus, Human Rights First, Impact Fund, Just Solutions, Juvenile Law Center, Kentucky Committee to End Executions, Lambda Legal, Latino Justice, Louisiana Advocates for Immigrants in Detention, Muslim Advocates, National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, National Center for Transgender Equality, National Council of Jewish Women, Greater Miami Section, almost done, National Employment Law Project, National Legal Aid and Defender Association, National Organization for Women, Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice, North Carolina Coalition for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights, Southern Poverty Law Center, Advocates for Human Rights, The Sentencing Project, True Colors United, Witness to Innocence. If we kept the letter open longer, we'd probably get even more signatories. But this is an impressive coalition of people who realize that our country needs to return to her true self. I'll conclude with this. It is, if you are interested in this issue, if you believe, as these individuals believe, that that our country should not be giving cover at the UN to Saudi Arabia and Iran, that we should instead be voting for the same global moratorium that we have imposed thanks to our courageous President Joe Biden here on federal executions, then please call the President, call the White House. You can email the White House at comments@whitehouse.gov. That's comments@whitehouse.gov. Or you can call the White House, Tuesday through Thursday anyway, at 202-456-1111. That's 202-456-1111. And ask the President to support the UN resolution for the global abolition of the death penalty. He's already placed a moratorium at home. The way that we've always done it is not a reason to vote with Saudi Arabia and Iran and North Korea. We need to stand up and return to our true selves. As the great Thomas Merton, Catholic mystic from Kentucky, said, we need to return to our true selves. We need to realize that, in fact, it is time to abolish the death penalty. It's not a deterrent. It is expensive. It does not work. It cannot be reversed. And following me will be, I think, even more compelling testimony to the truth that very often human systems of justice, even in democracies, sometimes get it wrong. And you cannot undo one of these sentences when we do it. When a conviction has been erroneous, when it needs to be overturned. If the person's been killed, it's too late. So I look forward to a time when all of us can look back on this week and say that this was the week, after several shameful votes at the UN, that the United States showed our traditional allies, almost all of the other nations in our own hemisphere, those 40 nations in Africa and people all around the world, that the United States has returned to its true self. So with that, let me ask Mr. Lindsey to call up our next speaker. Thank you.
Your call to action.
Yeah, call to action. I'm going to do it again. Thank you. Call to action, please. Call the White House, and you can call them at 202-456-1111. That's 202-456-1111. Or you can email them at comments@whitehouse.gov. Let Joe Biden know that we have his back and encourage him to do the right thing. 11 to 3. So you'll have to call tomorrow. So it's 11 to 3, Tuesday to Thursday. That's when the comments line, if you're a phone person. If you'd rather just do it by mail, you can email it at comments@whitehouse.gov. Thanks.
Thank you, Governor. If we was grading him for quality insurance, I guarantee you he'll get an A+. So, as we move on, the next person to speak is someone that is very close to me and our organization, dedicated. He's the chairman of the board of Witness Innocence, and I'd like to introduce.
Thank you. Thank you very much for my presence here today. I am Kwame Ajamu. As Herman has said, president and chairman of Witness Innocence. I want to start off by saying that if the state of Ohio had its way, I wouldn't be here today having this conversation. If the state of Ohio had carried out the execution upon me, it would have happened in 1976, as I was just 17 years old when I was arrested, taken into custody, tried and sentenced for a crime of murder, and then put on death row, all of which I was innocent. 25 years of my life in open population, 3 years on death row, and 39 years before I was able to stand here as a totally free man, exonerated from all charges, to express my need for everyone within the shot of my voice, within the sight of my physicalities, to express the same things that we all express today. Yes, we need the president to forego all of his other arrangements and go head on and let us get this death penalty abolition in motion. I am now 65 years old as of October 25th, so you know that it was a long time ago when the 17-year-old kid was taken into custody and charged with a crime he didn't do. It is my absolute honor to be able to stand here alive and well today and deliver what is customary to some and yet is ordinary to me. I feel it is my obligation as chairman to witness the innocent and also one who has suffered the stripes and strains of having been wrongfully incarcerated and sentenced to die to do just this and even more. I feel it is my obligation, in my opinion, to be the one to say, please, never again and not in my name. Capital punishment is the one issue that is like the demon, as you remember when you was a little kid and you were scared to go in the dark. And mama would say, get in there and lay down anyway. And you pull the covers halfway over your head and it feel like they were pulling at your feet. That is the fear that is invoked in capital punishment. Believe me, where is he at? When my newfound friend, Governor O'Reilly, said that these people in those third world countries use capital punishment as a means not to deter, but to frighten and impoverish their people anymore, are we almost on the brink of doing that here in America? We are supposed to be the most civilized, the most richest, the most everything, but we are doing too much when we send our own to death. That's my story. I'm going to stick with it. But in the days coming, in the weeks coming, in the years coming, you can count on me, if nothing else, to stand as I am now, with these men and women as I do now, as I will then, and only when I'm not able to. Thank you so much for having me. And remember, go and call President Obama. Obama.
Obama Biden.
President Obama Biden. Let's get it right. But go and call this president, email him, text him, catch his little dog trainer on the street, and say to him, please, support the cause that we support, because it's just not right. It never was, it never will be. Thank you.
I'll mention one more thing about the vote. I failed to mention that this vote at the UN is scheduled to come up Thursday. So hence the timeliness of this. The vote's Thursday. Mr. Lindsey, thank you.
Yes, so you definitely go out and, you know, if you need additional information, if you forget the information, you can go to witnessinnocent.org and learn the information to call for actions. We definitely need everybody that we can to let Biden know that we are recognizing what's going on and we're asking him to live up to what he was read on a platform. Our next guest, we are, okay, I skipped that one. She's here? Okay. So we are honored to welcome a political counselor of the Spanish Embassy. And definitely you can have the chair.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kwame, good to see you. Thank you very much. I'm here on behalf of the Spanish Embassy. It is an honor to see you, friends, again, Governor. We just want to support this initiative, as Spain has done with everything that relates to abolition of death penalty. Spain has been an abolitionist country since we came back to democracy in 1978. And totally since 1995, when we abolished military jurisdiction for death penalty. And with our friends in Switzerland, we promoted years ago the International Commission for the Abolition of Death Penalty, which is hosted in Spain, in Madrid. And Spain chairs its support group. There is not much I can add. we are part of the European Union. The European Union strongly supports abolition of death penalty. We carry out support to all those groups that encourage abolition of death penalty and promote it out of total respect, of course, of the American political system, but we would like to support any initiative in this sense. And we, of course, support the UN resolution, Governor, that you mentioned. We want to encourage initiatives like this. We also had an exoneree, a Spanish exoneree in the 1990s. So we understand your suffering, and we join you in sharing your lessons. And that's all. Thank you for your work.
Listen, thank you. Gracias. Do we want to ask the? You want to say anything on behalf of Switzerland? Come
Please
on.
do.
When will you
Please
get
do.
another chance today? Come on down. Ruth Dreyfus. Huh?
Yes, well, Vincent Barras, First Secretary at the Embassy of Switzerland, and we are a group of European countries that have been working on the topic of the death penalty, working with our friends and partners here in the US to talk about it and to express also our deep wish for its abolition. And so it's been an ongoing process. We're standing with civil society and all the people working on this topic, as was the 8th World Congress in Germany, in Berlin, for the abolition of the death penalty just a few weeks ago. And I have not prepared any specific remarks, just came to underline our support for the initiative and for this crucial week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I also want to thank Ruth Dreyfus, who serves. I serve on the International Commission Against the Death Penalty, and President Dreyfus is also on that. Awesome advocate. And please pass on her to her our gratitude.
I'll make sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for standing with us. Our next guest is also a co-founder of our great organization, Witness to Innocence. I've learned a lot from him. Him and Sister Helen Perdure started this organization back in 2003. And ever since then, it's been empowering death row exonerees around our great nations of the United States. So with no further ado, I would love to say his name. Welcome, Ray Crone.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's not always easy to talk about some of the past. You have people here that had to live that. I have to start out, as he said, my name is Ray Krone. I'm a death row survivor from Arizona. I also got to confess I used to support the death penalty. I was young. I believed what they told me. I found out a lot of things was wrong with what they told me. Yes, as you'd heard from Governor Malley, most all the things are failure. Not only that they get it wrong, it's not a deterrent. But I can tell you, at the age of 35, I was questioned about a murder of a local bar made in Phoenix, Arizona. 2 days later, I was arrested based on a bite mark. I was called a snaggletooth killer. Just 7 months after my arrest, I'm in trial, a capital murder trial, facing the death penalty, where the court-appointed attorney was paid $5,000 to defend me. $5,000. Can't even get a divorce for $5,000. Just 11 months after my arrest, I'm sitting on death row because I wouldn't take a plea bargain. 3 years on death row, I have to say, thank God for my worthless attorney. He'd done something right. My case was actually overturned. The prosecution withheld evidence. The judge had allowed it in, and a new trial was ordered. During that time, people were executed in the state of Arizona. It wasn't, oh, don't kill me, spare me, do me a favor. It's kill me and do me a favor. Dying's not the hard thing. It's living in that hell, in that isolation, that confinement, knowing that they're going to come and take your life. It's your family, your friends, your loved one can't do anything about it. I remember my family on that second trial when it came around that they mortgaged their house, cashed in the retirement funds, hired an attorney. To fight this system, they called me the snaggletooth killer. 3 bite mark experts testified for me alone. Imagine that wonderful day when in the courtroom there in front of a jury when a man testified that the saliva on the bite mark that I was supposed to make was not my DNA. I thought, yes, finally the truth is coming out. The bite mark, the DNA was not mine from that saliva. And then came time when that judge when that prosecutor stood before that jury and told him to disregard that DNA, ignore that DNA, that's easy to explain. She's a waitress. She handles bottles and glasses all day long. That was just transferred there by accident from somebody else. Took the jury just 3.5 days to come back, find me guilty again. And this time, when you have to go before the judge for sentencing, the judge said he had lingering residual doubt of my guilt. He said it was hard for him to believe with somebody in my background, 6 years active duty Air Force, honorable discharge, top secret clearance, 7 years with the post office, a letter carrier. I had no criminal record, none whatsoever. They put me on death row. That judge said he had lingering residual doubt of my guilt. He said that outweighed the aggravating factor, and this time he sentenced me to 25 to life, and then added 21 more onto it. My appeals were turned down. My family was fighting for still my release. And finally, in 2001, Arizona state legislatures recognized the importance of validity of DNA and allowed for post-conviction relief testing of previously untested DNA material, provided it was properly maintained and would have direct bearing on the case. The victim had been stabbed to death in the men's bathroom of the bar where she worked. She was found in the morning by the owner. That clothing had been cut off her with a butcher knife from in that kitchen, was stabbed so hard with that butcher knife that it actually bent the blade on that. Some of my experts have said he probably had cut himself. The perpetrator maybe cut themselves. And having looked at the clothing under that new law, we found that there was some kind of staining on their pants, on their underwear. And there was a hearing to decide. The prosecution objected, said it was a wild goose chase, a fishing expedition. It's so unnecessary, Your Honor. Mr. Crone's been convicted twice of a jury of your peers. There's no need for this testing of this DNA. But thankfully that judge ordered that testing. Not only was DNA recovered from her pants and her underwear, not only did it not match me or the victim, but by then, now in 2002, the new law, there was CODA database. DNA was being stored all over the country, just like fingerprints now, but it was only accessible by law enforcement agencies. And the Phoenix Police Department was assigned to do that DNA testing. And I say, you go, girl, because that DNA lab technician, after testing and proving it wasn't my DNA and it was the victim's DNA, she took that sample, put it in a national data bank, and it came back with a match. And I remember that day walking over to my counselor. I was called over, it was April 8th, 2002. My counselor said, your attorney's on the phone. And I picked up the phone. My attorney said, Ray, how you doing today? I said, fine, just another day in paradise. And he laughed. He said, well, what are you hungry for? I said, Alan, what the devil are you talking about? He said, I just got off the phone with the prosecutor's office. They just got back from the judge's chamber. They're cutting the paperwork. You're coming home today. I said, what did you just say? He said, roll up, Ray, it's all over, you're coming home. 3 hours later, I walked out off of that row in Yuma, Arizona. Walked out of that yard wondering, what are they up to this time? Because they never pulled this trick before. They never admitted to my innocence. They fought me the whole way. And I walked out that day to start my life all over again at the age of 45. Reunite with my family and friends, and also the distinction of being the 100th person in America. 100 mistakes have been made. 100 people were convicted and sentenced to death. Going to die for something they didn't do. So there was a lot of media coverage. People wanted to know what it was like to survive. How did I do it? I talked about how I read the Bible front to back 3.5 times during that time in prison. Slept with it under my pillow. Talked about how my family and friends, the sacrifices they made to defend me, believe in me, trust in me. And later on, one of the reporters in the back raised his hand. He said, well, Mr. Crone, given your faith in God, how do you justify him leaving you in prison for 10 years? I thought, my God, how do you answer a deep soul-searching question like that? How do I justify God leaving me in prison for 10 years? What do you say? I was frozen. The mics, the cameras are all leaning forward, and something came to my head. I said, well, you know, maybe it's not about those 10 years I spent in prison. Maybe it's about what I have to do the next 10 years. Yes, I had the great privilege of being in on the beginning of the witness to innocence for the men and women who, like me, have been wrongfully convicted, who had names assigned to them. As I said, I was a snagger-tooth killer, who walked those halls knowing that the state was going to kill them. And now that's why I changed my opinion on the death penalty and why I know what I have to do to stand here with these men and women who are here to tell you what's wrong with the death penalty, to make explanations for things that people have been defending all along, saying we need it, for those people that use the death penalty as a tool, as a pry bar to force people to confess to something they didn't do. Now here, lastly, I want to just say, I hope you all can took that number down and have the opportunity to make that call, to ask our president to please shift that vote to yes, we support a moratorium on the death penalty. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ray. Our next speaker is also co-sponsors in today's press conference. She is the executive director of Catholic Mobilizing Network, and we'd like to welcome.
Thank you, Herman, and thank you, Ray, for that powerful testimony. Good afternoon. I'm the executive director of Catholic Mobilizing Network, and I'm honored to be here today to join with such courageous death row exonerees, dedicated religious and political leaders, to add our support for the UN resolution calling for an international moratorium on the use of the death penalty. Perhaps the most central tenet of Catholic teaching is the inviolability and dignity of the human person. It is this very tenet which undergirds the Catholic Church's absolute opposition to the death penalty, a practice which the Catholic Catechism calls inadmissible in all cases. Catholic Mobilizing Network empowers Catholics and people of goodwill across the country to educate, advocate, and pray for an end to capital punishment. CMN seeks to amplify the flaws of our modern capital punishment system, which targets people of color, people experiencing poverty, people with serious mental illness, intellectual disability, and trauma. This system fails to deter crime, fails to bring healing to victims, and ultimately fails to uphold the sanctity of life. Today, in awareness of these irreparable flaws and in accordance with our faith, Catholic Mobilizing Network urges President Biden to support the UN Death Penalty Moratorium resolution. We applaud President Biden's leadership in campaigning on an anti-death penalty platform and declaring an official moratorium on federal executions, an action which the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops called a welcome step toward building a culture of life. With the impending UN vote, President Biden has an opportunity to support another step toward abolition progress. In doing so, the president will not only be making good on his campaign promises, but also he'll be living out the teaching of the Catholic faith he professes. The Holy See has long supported a UN death penalty moratorium resolution, which should come as no surprise given how outspoken the last 3 popes have been in their opposition to the death penalty. This, of course, includes Pope Francis himself, who just 3 months ago declared the global abolition of the death penalty as his official prayer intention for the month of September. And make no mistake, this formal Catholic opposition is matched by people in the pews. Year after year, tens of thousands of Catholics take action with CMN by opposing upcoming executions here in the United States and supporting death penalty repeal legislation at the state level. I might add that beyond Catholics, there's a groundswell of grassroots advocates, national allies, of which many the governor has mentioned today, and members of Congress as well, who are urging for an end to the death penalty in the U.S. To support the end of the death penalty, it has never been stronger, and this reflects a growing consensus, not just among Catholics, but again, among all people of goodwill who recognize that capital punishment is irreparably broken. In summary, today we urge President Biden to fulfill his campaign pledge to eliminate the practice of capital punishment. We ask him to support a yes vote on the UN's death penalty resolution, and in doing so, to help advance approaches to justice that value the sanctity of all human life. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Our next speaker, I love this woman. She is so great, and I think her favorite hobby is photos. She loves capturing every moment she can. She was the first woman to be exonerated from the death row in the United States. I'd like to introduce Miss Sabrina Butler-Smith.
Thank you. My name is Sabrina Butler, and I'm from the state of Mississippi. As Kwame said, if Mississippi had their way, I wouldn't be standing here today. I was also 17 years old when my case happened. In 1989, I was accused of killing my son. This was a hard thing for me because I really don't have any words for what I went through. I can just tell you that it's something that no person should ever have to go through. I tried to perform CPR on my son, and I didn't know how. And for that, I was given the death penalty, sentenced to die. I was sentenced to die March the 13th of 1990. My death date was July the 2nd of 1990. When I made it to death row, I was 19 years old. Not knowing anything about law or anything like that, had never been in trouble before in my life. Having to face sitting on death row, having a death date nobody told me about, the state and how they had to exhaust all state remedies before they could actually carry out a death sentence was hard. I had to find that out about from another inmate next door to me. That's hard. People being sentenced to crimes that they didn't commit is very hard. So that should tell you right there something is wrong with this justice system and the way they apply the death penalty. All we're saying as a group of people, all my comrades, my brothers, all of us, all we're saying is we need to change this. And the death penalty is not it. I don't care how you look at it, it's not it. We stand with the president, and I hope that it's signed and passed. And I know then that we have done something right. I'm going to keep fighting, and I know my brothers are going to keep fighting. We're not going to stop until this is changed. So please stand with us, and let's get this thing right. That's all I have to say. Just stand with us.
Sabrina, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Powerful stuff. For those of you that might be just tuning in, we're asking people to please write to the White House. You can send to the comment line at any time. There is a UN resolution vote, and it is coming up this upcoming Thursday. And 8 other votes. The United States, sadly, has not lived up to its ideals and the power of its principles on the international stage, voting with Iran and Saudi Arabia against the moratorium. We want the United States to vote for the moratorium, just as President Biden has courageously declared a moratorium on federal executions here at home. I'm told that the White House comment line closes at 3, but the switchboard line is 202-456-1414. You can email the White House at comments@whitehouse.gov. Again, that vote is this Thursday. And you could also go to visit deathpenaltyaction.org, send a letter through their action site to the White House to help get this done. Mr. Lindsey?
Just like a governor, he just bogart, just take over. But I was so happy to be a part of it. Our next speaker is the president of the Latino Christian National Network. Pastor.
I'm honored to stand with my brothers and sisters and my friends this afternoon. My name is Carlos Malavea, and I'm the president of the Latino Christian National Network. It's a network of Pentecostal, evangelical, and historic Protestant, Latino, and Latina leaders in the USA. As a disciple of Jesus and an evangelical Christian, I am morally bound to join today with my friends, my brothers and my sisters in this panel, to appeal to our government. The Holy Scriptures state that every human being possesses the image of its Creator. The image is not simply an imprint of sorts, but the real presence of God in every human being. To intentionally violate or end a person's life is an act perpetrated not only against a person, but perpetrated against God's self. Furthermore, as we have heard before here, there's no proper way of applying capital punishment, as there is no guarantee that the sentence is not applied to an innocent person. So we appeal to our government on behalf of God to respect the dignity of every human being by supporting the United Nations Moratorium Resolution on Capital Punishment. Based on my Christian evangelical conviction, capital punishment is morally wrong, regardless of whether it's applied in an extrajudicial, summary, and arbitrary manner, or in a democracy like ours. During the last 20 years, the number of Americans questioning or rejecting capital punishment continues to grow, including among my fellow evangelical Christians. A recent Rasmussen report released in November of this year found that fewer than half American adults now support the death penalty. Those saying they favored the death penalty fell by 17 percentage points from the 63 who favor capital punishment in a Rasmussen survey in 2011. The latest Gallup report shows that 42% of Americans are not in favor of the death penalty. That is an increase of 10% since 2012. In 2019, a Gallup poll showed that 60% of Americans preferred life imprisonment to the death penalty, 60%. In 2015, the National Association of Evangelicals released a resolution regarding capital punishment. I don't speak on behalf of the NAE, but I would like to quote just something from their statement in 2015. And I quote, it says, "Because of the fallibility of human systems, documented wrongful conviction, and our desire that God's grace, Christian hope, and life in Christ be advanced, a growing number of evangelicals now call for government entities to shift their resources away from pursuing the death penalty and to opt for life in prison without parole as the ultimate sanction." I end the quote. Other evangelical Latino networks like ours in our country have expressed their opposition to capital punishment. My own denomination, the Presbyterian Church USA, has been strong and consistent in calling for a moratorium on capital punishment. The PCUSA most recent call for a moratorium was issued in 2018 by the 223rd General Assembly. Even though more than probably or close to 170 nations have repealed the death penalty or adopted moratoriums, our country is yet to join most of the world's nations. We can change that and send a strong message to the world. As a servant of Christ and as a citizen, I join all of you by asking President Biden to support a yes vote for the UN resolution. Such a vote will be consistent with our president's position, with the moral image of our country, and more importantly, with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
You're here. No, I'm no further commercial message.
I would like to welcome now one of the newest members to Witness Innocence, who was innocent on death row in North Carolina and is now on the staff of North Carolina Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, Alfred Rivera.
And thank you. Hey everyone, my name is Alfred Rivera, and in 1999, I was freed from death row after serving 2 years of a wrongful conviction. Today I'm here along with my fellow exonerees and everyone else that supports us to urge our president and our nation to adopt the resolution imposing a moratorium on executions in the United States. We also will urge our president to stand firm on his promise to pass the legislation and eliminating the death penalty on the federal level, and to incentivize, quoting him partially, states to follow the federal government's example. Furthermore, we stand as witnesses that the death penalty is racist, prejudiced, and operates under a failed system that perpetuates the handing down of death sentences to the innocent, to those mentally ill, to people of color, and to the poor all across our nation. We stand together with all who realize in this day and time that the death penalty in America has failed the people in terms of true justice. Thank you.
Our last speaker, and a great colleague of mine from Witness the Innocent, one of our peer organizers. In our organization, we have peer organizers that helps us through the trauma that we go through. I like to refer to him as my twin because we kind of look alike when we was young. But Mr. Shujaa Graham. Shujaa Graham.
Okay. Thank you, Herman, and thank everyone for being here today, and thank you, Governor, for coming here and being with us, and Kwame and Ray Crone, our founder, and all other organizations who have come here to find it necessary to participate with us today. I see the death penalty itself not as just a bad public policy, but as a human rights violation, and I attack it as such. The death penalty itself solves no social problems. It solves no crime. It only intensifies the cycle of violence here in America. So Mr. Biden, the President of the United States, we claim to be the leading forces on so many different issues. I hope you'll listen today, but not only listen, give us a patient ear and a deep consideration, and help us declare a moratorium on capital punishment. My friends, I spent over 11 years of my life in prison, 7 of them fighting capital punishment. I'm here today not because of the system. I'm here in spite of the system. Some 7 years ago when I went off the death row, it was some 2 little white children that I never met, decided one day not to go to school. They wanted to learn about the criminal justice system here in the United States of America. And when I was convicted and sentenced to die at San Quentin on December the 8th until gas penetrated upon my personhood, those 2 young students was the first one to come up to see Shujaa Graham. They said, Shujaa, we're going to get you out of here. And when they said that, little did I said, what can they do against the power of the state of California? Little did I know. Those 2 young students went out and began to organize, young, old, and anyone that would give them a listening ear, and began to organize. And after being on California's death row for 3 years, it was like an answer to a prayer. The courts overturned my conviction. I thought I would be going home fairly soon, but it wasn't in the card. The state of California tried me a 3rd time and a 4th time. That's why I always say, I'm here in spite of the system. My friends, if we assume that life is worth living, and everyone has a right to survival, then we must find an alternative to capital punishment. Our possibilities is like the stars. As long as we continue to get better each and every day, America can lead on many things. I want America to be the leading force on human rights. So today, let us get out and continue to educate our people. Thank you all for coming here. Thank you all for being in our beautiful state. And Herman, stay off the governor. If you want to talk about someone, go to Florida and talk to DeSantis.
I would love to talk to DeSantis, to tell you the truth. Well, it comes to me. And my message, I mean, we've heard all this great information. I have 2 questions for Governor O'Malley when I bring this to a close. But I want the American citizens to think about something. I know for me, growing up, when I was young, I always loved pets. And when my pets passed away, or someone in my family, my loved one, passed away. My parents always taught me that they're going off to a better place. But then when I ran into the death penalty, I never knew about it until I was, 36 years old and was facing death. The government taught me that death is for those that's bad. And that's very contradicted. And I'd rather choose my parents' teaching that death is good. It's a part of life. And it don't matter what you believe in, what your reasons is for supporting the death penalty. I believe it's not right. I would believe that we should treasure life as we're taught by our parents and our loved ones. That's what I believe. I don't understand how legislators are willing to cut the budget from the things that U.S. citizens need, like Medicare, disabilities, schools. Take away those fundings, but won't simply save us millions by taking away the death penalty. The death penalty cost is outrageous. It's outrageous. For trials, for litigations, for tying up our courtrooms. They see the danger. And then think about this. Legislators should always think about how many innocent people are they willing to kill to leave this failed system intact. And that's what the U.S. citizens need to think about when they're voting. They need people for us, not people for revenge, running, being tough on crime and being a little too tough where they're creating victims. Being tough on crimes created death row exonerees. And we have trauma behind that. And the sad part about it is, I would say about 85% of the people that's exonerated from death row don't even receive compensation. But this is a system that's supposed to be justice and right. And I hope that, and I'm going to close with saying this, I hope that not only Biden sees this message, but all the legislators and Congress around the world. And I hope they consider all the information in this. And I hope they bring humanity back into the United States, into our government. I thank everyone for coming today. You know, if, as I said before, if you want to call the actions, Governor O'Malley then repeated some. And we also have a follow-up on that on our website, witnessinnocent.org, in case you didn't catch it through the captions or whatever. And hold on, let me pull out my phone. I got two questions. I have two questions that I really wanted to ask Governor O'Malley. Will the vote on Thursday be live, and how can we watch it? What else?
The last time, the third committee vote was in fact live streamed, and I believe that this one will also be live streamed. They have a pretty cool website at the UN, so the UN resolution vote will come up on December 15th. I don't know exactly what time of day. Stay tuned. We should update all our partners on when that will be.
The second question is, what effect will a yes vote by the U.S. to the UN Death Penalty Moratorium resolution have at home federally and statewide?
Awesome question. Part of the answer to that question is legal. Part of the answer to that question is more, how shall we say it, motivational and spiritual. The legal answer is that whatever happens at the UN doesn't mean that everybody goes home with a piece of paper, and every place where it's legal in our states, it gets abolished. We know that. But nonetheless, we believe that U.S. leadership on this resolution will have an effect that is hard to estimate, really. I mean, one is the effect here at home, to bring our national voice in the UN into alignment with President Biden's own courageous stances here on federal execution. So the moral suasion that has, the momentum it will give to people working in other states that are starting to get to the same point that Maryland and Virginia have already gotten to repeal the death penalty and focus those dollars on things that actually save lives. Hard to estimate exactly what that persuasive value will be within those around those tables of democracy. But there's a third point to this as well on the international stage, and that is that our country is most powerful when we are exercising our considerable powers, economic, military, diplomatic, in alignment with our greatest power, our fourth power, which is the power of our principles. And right now, this vote is contrary to the very power of our principles. They laugh at us. The Russians vote with the other 128 nations of the earth so that they can snicker at our hypocrisy, that we should talk about the rights about human rights, about the dignity of every individual. And then we side with Saudi Arabia on this vote. We side with Iran that's hanging protesters. It is a shameful vote. And it undermines our ability and our power in the international arena to bring other nations to the cause, the more life-giving cause of what human collaboration, about our common good, about solidarity and dignity really should be all about. There are other nations who also vote with those rogues, who give cover to Saudi Arabia, who give cover to Iran, who give cover to North Korea by saying, well, the United States voting for the death penalty. So why are you trying to tell us that we should do the right thing? It is time to bring our country. President Biden has done so much to restore international alliances and trusts after the last presidency. And this is a part of it. This is a part of what this vote, changing this vote to a yes vote, is a part of what it's going to take to restore America's credibility in the world, to tap into that fourth power. So I hope that answers as best one human being can that question. Anybody have any questions here? May I ask? Anybody have any questions here? I know a lot of reporters are watching live stream.
We're getting them off of here.
Okay. And what's that?
We're getting the staff is texting.
Okay.
That's why I got those questions, but I wasn't bright enough to ask that question. It was for that. The next question is, and anybody here could chime in on this, is what steps can be taken to abolish the death penalty in the U.S.? I'm going to say the first one. Let your legislator know that it's okay to remove the death penalty in our United States. Let them know it's okay for them to discuss that, and that we do not look at them as being lenient on crime because they choose to fix something that is just wrong.
Can I share a story? When we were in Maryland, and I'm going to grab the cat, excuse me. There's a few handouts at the door. One of them, I believe this one's from you all, from our Catholic friends, and it has the states of the United States and where we stand in terms of repealing the death penalty. In Maryland, it took us 3 tries to repeal the death penalty. But even as we tried and failed, we continued to do more and more of the things that drove crime down to a 35-year low, and we kept calling the question. So I think to answer the question, what can we do? We can call, as you said, Mr. Lindsey, on our legislatures to spend our money on things that work to save lives, not on things that have all of the inherent fallibility of any human justice system, that are expensive and that divert us. We should be doing more of the things that work and stop doing things that don't work and that undermine, our principles as a people. Those were the arguments that we found eventually carried the day. And shortly after Maryland repealed, so too did Virginia. So, each state matters. And there's more states that we need to work on.
something to that. I think that the public should be more informed of the racist roots of the death penalty in America.
That's true.
And that that fact makes it more urgent to show the world, as the governor was speaking on our nation and our president, to show the world that in spite of our racist history, that now is the time to repair that, starting with the death penalty, which the world is behind America. When America has the gumption to abolish the death penalty based on its racist roots, and to come out in publicly and let the world know, right, then I believe that the respect and the admiration of America will be so great in this world that we will actually be able to live under the principles and the ideals of the Founding Fathers.
I'm just going to offer. I just wanted to add that, you know, the death penalty is here in the United States, and it is alive and well in certain states, active in particularly a few states. We're talking about a UN moratorium resolution right now in very much an international scale. But it's not lost on us that on Thursday this week, there's going to be an execution in Mississippi. And so we want to lift up and hold in our hearts and our prayers, but make our voices known that that's not okay. And that stands for folks in Mississippi, but it stands for folks all over the country who can use their voice to let the governor know, who can chime in and try to save lives before executions are happening. There's another one coming up on January 3rd in the state of Missouri. And there's a host of executions that are set. You can look at those at website like Death Penalty Information Center. You can look at CatholicMobilizing.org and understand how you can use your voice to help stop executions. But there's also states that are on the verge of repealing, that are very close to moving forward, much like the state of Maryland did. Ohio, we're watching very closely. So there's things that you can do in states around the country to move towards abolition. Again, at the state level, you can help save lives by stopping executions. And really just, I would invite everyone to use their spheres of influence, be it your church, be it your community, to raise this issue. I think part of its insidiousness is the fact that a lot of people don't know, or if it's not in your state, you think it's dead, but it's not. And it's really going to take all of us to end the death penalty. And there's organizations like Witness to Innocence, like Catholic Mobilizing Network, and others that can help you channel your voice and unite with others in the United States who really want to make a difference and end the death penalty for good here in the U.S.
Time is up, but I'm going to run over anyway. They told me I could do it. No, seriously, the answer to that question in my perspective, again, I have to go back to when I was a child. And as a child, 17 years old, sentenced to die and put into that cell on death row, I began to do one of three things. And that's what got me to this point today. The three things that I think is very important when you have opposition in your community, anywhere in life, but especially that we're facing now, is that when you see this evil, you attempt to stop it. That's exactly what we're trying to do now. But if you can't stop it, then at least stand before the podium and speak against it. And if you're unable to speak against it, and now I'll take you back to when I was 17 years old, placed on death row. Hate it. Hate it. Hate it deep in your heart. And that will carry you to the next level, where you become a man like I did in prison and fight against capital punishment as I do in the free world. And thank you for that moment.
Well, our time is up, and I don't think they give us overtime in this room. So I want to thank everybody for coming, and this is one of the greatest moments of my life to stand up here, knowing that I'm supported by national and international organizations and people around the world are standing with us. So Biden, look out. We're coming even harder next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not taking the governor. Whoever it be. Dear Bully.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. It was awesome. Thank you. Hey, thank you.
Now we got to think of our next idea.
I'm so glad you're in with us. We needed to do this. That's a good.